Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Friday Forum. I'm Mila Mulgar, the director of Launch Minnesota. Launch Minnesota, for those of you that might not know, is working to empower and elevate our state's innovation ecosystem. And our main purpose is to help accelerate our startups, our entrepreneurs, and our innovators by really providing three key focus areas. One, increased access to capital, a collaborative and connected culture across the state, which we now have a hub and spoke model, and people are working together all across the state to help startups and entrepreneurs start and scale. And then our third goal is to increase entrepreneurial talent and expertise. And so today, with the individuals that you'll hear from and the Friday forums that we host on a monthly cadence is one way to address that goal. So today is a topic that I hear a tremendous need from our startup community, and that's legal issues, legal advice, what to do next. And so I'm sure you're all very familiar with Legal Corps, an amazing nonprofit that we have here in Minnesota. And we're really fortunate that Donna and Sarah from Legal Corps are going to be hosting this conversation today. We thank them for their time today to be able to host. And so I'm just going to transfer it right over to them. We'll save some time at the end of this session for some community updates. If you have things to share, we'll also leave time for questions, of course. So Sarah, Donna, take it away.
Thank you, Neela, and thank you everyone here, and welcome. My name is Sarah Lewis, and I am program manager in the business and nonprofit law areas for Legal Corps. And I'm going to do just a very brief introduction of our organization, as is Donna, and then we're going to turn over the floor to our guests that we've brought with us today, three of our wonderful attorney volunteers, to speak with you on different legal topics that affect startups and entrepreneurs. Legal Corps, just for a little bit of background, is a nonprofit organization, and we coordinate pro bono legal services in non-litigation areas of small business, intellectual property, and nonprofit law areas. We have a roster of about 500, 600 attorneys throughout the state of Minnesota who practice in the intellectual property and business law areas, who donate their time through our organization to assist our clients. And our mission, our organizational mission, is to expand access to the legal system in those areas, in business and intellectual property, to those who might not have had easier access in the past. The way we deliver these services is three primary service delivery models. We staff brief advice clinics with our attorneys, we coordinate full representation assistance, and we produce and put on educational workshops as well. And I have a cat assisting, excuse me. And then lastly, kind of the philosophy behind our organization is that sound legal guidance on the front end of a new venture, whether it's a small business or an invention, is really critical to trying the best to ensure the future success of that venture or invention. And so that's on the kind of a front end approach, preventative and assistant on the front end, help ensure that success down the line. Donna is going to provide a few words about the inventor assistance component of Legal Corps, and then we'll start with hearing from our first attorney.
Good morning, and thank you everyone for being on. My name is Donna Rauch, and I'm the Inventor Assistance Program Manager at Legal Corps. And this program was created at the request of and with the encouragement of the United States Patent and Trademark Office as a means of helping independent low-income inventors protect their invention and get their innovation to the public. So this program has been operating since 2011, and we work with essentially the same business models as Sarah's programs. We have 5 specific intellectual property brief advice clinics every month. So that is staffed by a patent attorney. So the information is very targeted to that specific topic. So today we have with us Nick Anderson, and he has been volunteering with us, thank you, Nick, for many years. And he is a patent attorney, and I'm going to turn it over to him to address intellectual property issues.
Sure. Thanks, Donna. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So like Donna said, I've been working with the Inventor Assist program for a long time. I came over to Faegre, I think in 2014. Right now, I'm IP counsel for the rhythm management and diagnostics franchises at Boston Scientific. I've been at Boston Scientific for just over a year now, and prior to that, I was a partner at Faegre Drinker. My focus mainly was in patent strategy for medical device companies and other mechanical technologies, and then through that, I think I came over there in 2014 and was involved with the Inventor Assist program right away in terms of brief advice clinics, so counseling solo inventors and other startups, and then also in drafting pro bono patent applications. And now I'm the chair of the Legal Core Inventor Assist program. For startup and small business issues, I think the two kind of broad issues when it comes to intellectual property are education and access. Education, I think, is a big barrier because intellectual property is kind of a stopping point. I think a lot of times when these brief advice clinics, a client will come to me and say, well, I need a patent on this, and say, well, you can't. This is the first thing typically, because it's not that type of protection, or it is kind of a stopper for the business moving forward, which isn't necessarily true. I think as a patent attorney, people or an intellectual property attorney, I often say you don't actually need intellectual property to keep going with your idea. It might not fall within the realm of protection. It might not be financially viable at the time, or there are other areas of protection that you can pursue. So education, what is intellectual property? How can it be used? What can it be used for? The next part, I think, is another big one, is access. Who can help you and who can help others in terms of pursuing intellectual property, or kind of the other areas around that. I'll talk a little bit about agreements at the end here. And the cost. I think the cost in entering into, especially the patent arena, even in the trademark arena, is prohibitive for a lot of small businesses and startups and solo inventors. There are ways to kind of work around that, or kind of help facilitate obtaining patent protection or trademark protection. But kind of education, where to go, where to get advice, is kind of, it comes back to that, because having the correct advice about when to enter, when to seek patent protection or trademark protection, when not to, can kind of help mitigate those costs. So generally, the way I think about patent or IP strategy or patent strategy is kind of hand in hand with your business strategy. Whether that's what is your goal of your business? What are you trying to do? I think, is your goal to be purchased? Is your goal to commercialize something? And what does that look like? And how can IP help with that? It's an asset. Can be used as a competitive advantage if used in a way that works. It also can be used on the defensive side to determine what your risk is too. So always your business strategy should be considered first before going into intellectual property. It might not be the correct time to pursue, for example, patent protection. I've always go back to patent protection because that's my main focus area. But kind of identifying what is protectable, protecting that if it is something that's protectable, avoiding third-party patents if they're out there, or trademarks, and then kind of using that intellectual property. Other parts of managing and potentially acquiring are kind of not typical for startups, but how do you use your intellectual property, whether that's a patent, a copyright, or a trademark, and kind of how does your business strategy flow into all that? I think the big thing here again is cost. A lot of the times your money as a startup is tight, so it might not be the most appropriate to pursue patent protection or IP protection if it's the right time, or if it's the right kind of method. There are also narrower forms of patent protection, kind of circling back to that education part of it, that just having a patent isn't kind of the end all be all there. So what are your business goals? Easiest example, are you looking to get purchased? Then it might be beneficial to have patent protection or invest in that area. If that's not your goal, if that's not something else, that's kind of a different question. What is your business strategy, and how can IP help with that? Education is key there, and financial education being part of that. So I think kind of with that in mind, or that backdrop in mind, that business strategy should drive your IP strategy. I have a couple points. First is that IP is not always necessary. It might not be something that can be protectable under intellectual property. It might be kind of, a lot of times I think it's on the business method or your concept for your business. It's if when I've been advising clients in the kind of the brief advice clinic session, it seems a lot of times that me saying that actually, you're not able to seek patent protection or IP protection for your business concept, that can be a deterrent effect. But I think if your idea is a good one, if your concept is a good one, others might try to knock it off. I view that as a good thing if other people are trying to knock off or try to go after what your same area. IP can be used as a protection or facilitate that, but oftentimes what's really the driving factor is the market and how your business is performing in the market. The second part of that is what can be protected. There's patent protection, copyright, trademark, and trade dress. All of these kind of change or are different focus areas for your protecting your assets. It might not be appropriate for protecting your business concept. That doesn't fall with any of those any of those IP protections. But having kind of other areas to facilitate your business strategy and knowing what those are. So going back again to education, access and financial education. When and where can you pursue IP protection? Aligning with your corporate strategy, and if it is, this my focus at being on the medical device side is your R&D strategy. When are you planning to release your product if it is a product? What are you trying to do with your corporate strategy, and how can your assets, thinking of it as a property asset, how can that facilitate your end goal? Will IP actually enhance your goal? That's a kind of a big question to ask yourself. It might not enhance your goal. Kind of an interesting example I heard from the trademark side of things is if you want to trademark your business, I've heard of an example where a client registered attempted to register a trademark, and that drew the attention of a much bigger company, because you are monitoring your trademarks to kind of assess what else is out there. So it might not always be the best choice to pursue kind of the protection, and when you're pursuing the protection, how to pursue costs of pursuing patent protection or IP protection. Once you file your patent or your trademark, there are costs after the fact that you need to kind of build in. It's not done once you actually pursue that. There's other kind of cost considerations to keep in mind. And the last point, kind of in access and financial education, is your offensive strategy versus your defensive strategy. What are other competitors doing? Are they doing something similar? Are they not seeking IP protection? Kind of assessing what is out there to see what type of risk might occur, and what other kind of like companies are doing, to see if your strategy, or comparing your strategy to what they're doing. And the final point here, I think, is what is important is the agreement space. Making sure that you have, when you are entering into or do enter into kind of development agreements or consulting agreements, confidential disclosure agreements, that you are kind of thinking long term. You might, as a startup, your bargaining power is probably or likely diminished as compared to who you're entering into those contracts with. But maybe taking, considering where your goal is a year or 2 or 5 from now, and when you are entering into agreements, making sure that you have that strategy in mind, or that kind of big picture in mind, that you're not locking yourselves into something that's unattractive. So I think, kind of to sum it up quickly, education. What is IP? How can it help? What are the financial parts of that? And then kind of, does it align with your business strategy? Is it something that can help you? Again, I think it all kind of feeds back into education. What are you doing, or how does IP help you? And if it doesn't help you, it might not be something worth pursuing, and kind of keeping in mind long term. Maybe you come back to that when if the time is right. But does it help your business, and how does it help your business? I think that was close to my time, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Or it looks like Donna dropped her email in the chat to, or my email. Yes, other emails in the chat if there are any other questions.
There are not any questions in the chat, but I do have Sarah's and my email up there, as well as the General Legal Corps email and our website. If anybody is, or any of your contacts are looking for intellectual property brief advice, you will find all of those on our calendar on our website. There are 5 IP specific every month, and there are, I have to defer to Sarah, about 12 a month of transactional business brief advice clinics every month. So please check our website calendar for that. We had a recent change of our calendar platform, and I don't think it is linked to Launch Minnesota at the moment, but we are working on it.
Excellent. Thank you, Nick, and appreciate it. I would like to introduce our next speaker, and that is Shane Solinger. He is an associate at Faegre Drinker and a very regular and reliable Legal Corps volunteer. We greatly appreciate if you'd like to say more about his background in transactional business law attorney, who is here today to speak about legal issues and considerations for entrepreneurs and startup business formation, etc. Thank you, Shane.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, so I'm a associate. I'm a 4th-year associate at Faegre Drinker. My primary focus of my practice is mergers and acquisitions, but I also work with businesses in all areas of formation and startup issues, particularly raising financing. And then prior to coming to Faegre Drinker, I was an associate at another Minneapolis firm where my practice was similar, but there was a greater emphasis in terms of kind of formation and startup issues. And what I wanted to cover today is why official formation is important for startups and entrepreneurs. And when we talk about official formation, what I'm referencing is kind of actually forming the business with the Secretary of State, making it a separate legal entity from the owners. This is distinct from, say, a partnership or a sole proprietorship, where really the entity itself is just an extension of the owners versus being, under the eyes of the law, a separate business entity. So when we talk about this, we're talking primarily about limited liability companies and corporations. Choosing which of these is right for you is it can be an important consideration when you're starting your business. And the most important thing from a legal perspective is that doing official formation of your business gives you what's called the veil of protection, and it separates the assets of the business from the assets of its owners. Under the eyes of the law, the business is considered a separate person from its owners. Why this is important is that then any potential creditors of the business, any debts of the business, and any litigation that could come from those against the business is separate from the owners. You know, they can only go after the business. They can't actually go after the owners of the business. This means that you can operate your business while having that layer of protection of that, you know, if you make the wrong decision, there's no risk that a creditor is going to come and, you know, go after your house or any of your personal assets. Additionally, it's important because it makes it easier to raise capital. Any kind of investors that are coming in or partners are also going to want that veil of protection. So it's going to make you more it's going to make it easier to raise capital and be able to bring in partners and investors. And then also there can be potential tax advantages. Certain corporations, particularly corporations that are what are called S corporations, there can be some great advantages in terms of paying less with self-employment taxes. In terms of timing, official formation is recommended as early as possible. There's no downside there's very little downside, I should say, to doing it as soon as you want to start your business. It allows you to begin building the brand of the business from day one. which is great. And then also it kind of avoids the headaches of, going down the road as a self-proprietorship if you're an individual doing business, and then deciding later that you want to officially form your business, and then having to transfer over all the assets that are in the business, be they contracts or equipment or anything else you might have in using the business, to transfer those over to the new entity, which can just be a headache. So we recommend doing it as early as possible, generally. But really, there are a few critical events that you want to make sure that you're either organized or incorporated before. Any kind of significant supplier or vendor relationships that you might have, and you're going to be signing contracts, you want to make sure that from day one of those relationships, they're going to be with the business and not with you individually. Hiring employees, with employees can come significant liabilities, and generally an employer can be sorry, I saw there's a chat. So generally, hiring employees can come with, or employers can be responsible for the acts of their employees. So you want to make sure that those are with the business and not on your personal assets. And then also, like I said previously, bringing on partners, you'll want to be incorporated before. There are some common concerns, increased costs, right? Generally, these are minimal from the Secretary of State perspective, but they are there. So you have to pay when you officially organize or form your business. It's about $100 to $150 to file with the Secretary of State. And then you have to do annual reporting to stay in good standing. There's increased documentation. As a corporation, there's generally more because you have to have things like bylaws, and then also ongoing compliance concerns. As a corporation, you have to have annual meetings. You have to have a board of directors. That can just be the one person, but there is a requirement under the law generally to have a board. And then just record keeping in general. There's greater obligations than if you were either an LLC or an unincorporated organization. And then, so risk of double taxation. This is specific to the corporate context, not LLCs. I'll talk about this briefly because I think I saw in the chat that there was a question on this. But so when you form a corporation under the IRS, the default is that you're going to be taxed as a C corporation. There are advantages down the road for a C corporation, but typically as an entrepreneur, it's more advantageous to do an S corporation. And the reason being that a C corporation, the income is essentially taxed twice. It's taxed at the corporate level, and then also when there are distributions to the owners, that's going to be taxed to the owners at the individual level. If you file a subchapter S election with the IRS, this means that there's only one level of taxation, and that's on the income. All the income goes directly onto your personal tax return. And if you don't make the election timely, then you're going to be a C corporation and you're going to end up paying double taxes. And then, okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is when to engage legal counsel. As a lawyer, unsurprisingly, I would say as soon as possible. Legal counsel can be very critical to choosing an entity type, to help you with the costs that are associated with each, the benefits and the risks that are associated with each, as well as if you go the corporate route, in particular, kind of assistance with drafting those required documents, drafting the articles that have to get filed with the Secretary of State and bylaws, as well as in the LLC context and operating agreement. And then they can also help you to know what else is out there. So they can assist with ancillary filings. So, doing a DBA for your business, for instance, and then other startup issues. And then to prepare for a consultation with, if you are going the legal route, the legal counsel route, my recommendation is always just to know your goals and to be able to communicate them openly. This will help the lawyer be able to help to provide effective assistance. So if you can just say your goals and the goals of your business, what you're ultimately looking for, this can have a big impact on the considerations for what kind of entity type you should go with. And then also just being able to say what the nature of your business is, which is tied to your goals, because a lot of times, in addition to kind of the formal required governing documents for a business, there's a lot of times you'll want to get some key documents in place sooner rather than later. Particularly things like liability waivers. If you have a business that there could be, something that comes to mind is like a yoga studio, right? I've worked with with entrepreneurs doing this, right? There can be liability associated with that. So getting waivers in place, or for software companies, services agreements, if you're going to have any kind of real estate aspect of your business, getting leases in place, just having those forms from the outset can be very helpful. And then also something to bring to your legal counsel is just whether you'll have partners. That a lot of times can drive the type of business you want, based on the identity of the partners, the nature of the partners, and just different considerations with that. So with that, if there's any other questions, I saw that one came in.
Do you see that, Shane?
Sure.
The
Okay. Yeah. So we generally recommend Delaware. There's a couple reasons for that. I mean, one is that Delaware is generally considered more friendly for the company side, for business side. That's not necessarily always true, but it is. It can be true under certain circumstances. Also, they have, what Delaware has that's very advantageous is they have the Court of Chancery. So they have a separate court that only looks at business issues, with corporate issues primarily. And so what that means is that there's very developed case law in Delaware, whereas a lot of other states, Minnesota including, it's just not there. So a lot of times when you're making decisions in your corporation under Delaware, you can have a very clear roadmap of what's allowed versus not allowed. Whereas in Minnesota, not so much, but to an extent so, and particularly smaller states, that case law is just not there. So a lot of times you're making business decisions and asking your lawyers, is this allowable? And lawyers can basically say, well, based on reading the case law, we think it probably is, but you can't have the same level of certainty that you would have with Delaware.
Any other questions? Thank you, Shane. If another one pops up, we'll certainly share it with you. I appreciate your time. And then last, but certainly not least, our third attorney speaker for today is Tom Triplett, who's going to address legal issues and considerations around social enterprise and potentially public benefit corporations as well, both in the for-profit and nonprofit spaces. I could go on for about a minute or two about Tom's bio, but I'll let him decide what to share. But he's a longtime Legal Corp board member, volunteer, and extensive nonprofit law experience, and does a lot of presentations in recent years on social enterprise and public benefit corporations. Thank you for being here, Tom, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Hi, everybody. Tom Triplett. I'm elderly. Minnesota has this unique category of lawyers called emeritus lawyers. That is, when you reach the ordinary retirement age, I can continue practicing in a limited area, and my limited area is nonprofit law and tax. And I save money by not having to do the expensive lawyer registration every year, but I can only practice pro bono. All the work I do is volunteer and it's free. And of course, that's what Legal Corps is all about. I'm an alum of both Faegre and Frederickson law firms and the Attorney General's office. I spent most of my career in state government, ending up as Commissioner of Finance for the state. And now all my legal work is focused through Legal Corps, and I really enjoy working. I concentrate on the nonprofit arm of Legal Corps. And my history with social enterprise goes way back. I was one of the original members of the National Social Enterprise Alliance board and was a founder of the Social Enterprise Alliance Minnesota, which is still going. And as part of the social enterprise network here, it's Minnesota is a national leader in this field. So it's just so much fun to come back home to Minnesota and see all the stuff that's going on with social enterprise. But social enterprise is not a legal term, as we've been hearing from Shane and Nick earlier with corporations and so forth. It's a generic term talking about a business that has both profit and social goals. And so it's a very loose term and could apply to any business who might say, well, I've got both profit and social goals. So that's why this network, support network of Social Enterprise Alliance and Social Enterprise MSP is such a strong influence in Minnesota. So even though you won't find social enterprise in Minnesota statutes, there is one unique kind of business structure which you should think about as you move into this field. And it's called a public benefit corporation, PBC. Minnesota is one of 25 states nationally that has some variation of this unique corporate law. So it's a for-profit entity under Minnesota statutes, but it's not part of the general corporate world. It has its own filing. It's under Chapter 302A of Minnesota statutes, and 304A. And think of 304A as really the operating structure for public benefit corporations in the state. But there are now about 120 corporations that have either originally filed as a public benefit corporation or have transferred from a C Corp or S Corp, as Shane was talking about, into this unique category. And it's a growing category in Minnesota. And what's really interesting, you can go to the Secretary of State's website and find a listing of all the public benefit corporations in Minnesota, and you can find their annual reports. Public benefit corporations are required to report every year on their success in meeting their social goals, as well as their economic situation. So it's really fun to go back through that list and see the wide variety of organizations that are incorporated in Minnesota as public benefit corporations. And if you go that route under Chapter 304A, you have two choices. You can become a general benefit corporation or a specific benefit corporation. And that terminology relates generally to how focused are you on your work. A lot of the banks that are incorporated as public benefit corporations in Minnesota fall in the general benefit corporation idea. They finance social enterprises up from all sizes, all areas, and they have this more general characteristic, whereas the companies that these banks finance are specific benefit corporations. They may operate in the human services field, health services, whatever. So as you think about moving ahead with your business ventures here, consider a public benefit corporation filing. There's a little more reporting that has to be done, but basically you operate under the business laws otherwise of Minnesota. So you've got that, and you've also got this network of support, informal support. And we've got in Minnesota, the Social Enterprise MSP that I mentioned, the Impact Hub, Social Enterprise Alliance Minnesota. So just Google or go to Neela. Neela, I'm sure you've got the contact for all of these support organizations. But that's the for-profit environment of social enterprise in Minnesota. And we're also finding that nonprofit corporations in the state also are growing into this social enterprise field, because earned income is the fastest growing income source for nonprofits in Minnesota and nationally today. Nonprofits historically have relied on contributed income, grants, donations, and so forth, and that will continue to be probably the largest single element of nonprofit financing in Minnesota and the nation, particularly for 501c3 and nonprofits. But earned income is growing dramatically as income streams. So nonprofits can engage in business activities, and so long as those activities are related to the mission for which they've been granted tax exempt status, there's no limitation on how much of their revenues can come from earned income. But there are opportunities for nonprofits to engage in business activities that more typically are for-profit kinds of activities. And that's okay for nonprofits to engage in non-mission related activities. But the downside is you may be taxed by the IRS under something called the unrelated business income tax. So the bottom line here with nonprofits is that you can engage in earned income activities just like any business would. And to the extent that those business activities tie back to your tax exempt mission, there's no tax issues involved. But if you move into for-profit kind of activities that are not tied to your mission, you may generate significant income, but you may also be subject to the unrelated business income tax. So talk with your lawyer about these issues. You may find, for example, that even engaging in non-mission related activities can generate enough profit that it's okay to go ahead and pay the tax. It's still a net revenue gain for your organization. And the IRS does say, however, that there's a limit as to how much unrelated business income you can engage in as a nonprofit. And that generally limit, and it's never specifically said by the IRS, but lawyers say, try to keep non-mission related activities below 20% of your total revenues. And generally you'll be free from critical review by the IRS. So the bottom line here is that both for-profit and nonprofit entities can engage in social enterprise kinds of activities. But in the nonprofit world, it may be hard to find the sort of entrepreneurial spirit that's so critical to growing earned income activities. And so what often happens in our sector in nonprofits is partnering with for-profit entities. An example I like to use is Girl Scout cookies. Believe it or not, the cookies are not baked by the girls. The cookies are baked by bakers, for-profit bakeries, licensed by the Girl Scouts. So here's a relationship where the nonprofit entity, in this case, the Girl Scouts, partner with, through a license agreement, commercial bakeries. So they each benefit. The bakeries earn a profit. The Girl Scouts, learned sales skills and so forth and generate significant revenues from the sale of their cookies every year. So there are examples where the nonprofit says, I really have an idea for generating for-profit like activities, but I don't have the resources in-house to do it, so I'm going to partner with other entities, just as the Girl Scouts have done. And what's so interesting about the Minnesota social enterprise environment is there are funding streams that are operating to finance social enterprise, focused really on this narrow category of doing both income generating and social benefit activities in your business. And there's something called the Venn Foundation, VENN. Look that up. They're a really cool group created by graduates of the Social Enterprise Alliance in Minnesota. And they fund activities falling under this social enterprise umbrella. And it's a really cool organization. And so you might want to research them a little bit too. So the bottom line is that social enterprise kinds of activities are booming in both the for-profit and the nonprofit sector. In the for-profit sector, we have the Public Benefit Corporation in Minnesota. And there's also something called B Corp, the letter B Corp. It's a California corporation that certifies businesses as social enterprises. And you go through a process and you have to, you learn from the B Corp instructors, and you ultimately end up with a certification. It's not a governmental type of certification. It's a private certification, but still valuable, called B Corp. And interestingly, in Minnesota, we have several entities that have decided they want to be both a public benefit corporation and certified by the private B Corp entity. And I like to point to Sunrise Banks as an example of a Minnesota business entity that does both. So there is this really great network of entrepreneurs and nonprofits that have come together to form this nucleus of Social Enterprise Minnesota. And, I really strongly encourage you to check out that field, and a lot of advantages for both. And this focus on earned income in nonprofits is helping to underscore what's being regarded now as the reduction of the difference between for-profits and nonprofits, not just in Minnesota, but nationally. You've got more and more nonprofits engaging in business activities that look kind of like for-profit entities. And on the other extreme, you've got for-profits that really want to be seen as and advertise themselves as social enterprises. And so what is happening basically is the coming together in this field of both the for-profit and the nonprofit entities. So it's a really exciting time. In the for-profit world, you may have heard of ESG corporations. This is a concept where we're really zeroing in on those corporations that benefit society, not just make a profit. Large fund streams like Fidelity's ESG, Environment Social Governance funding stream, is now over $1 trillion. People are investing money in these social enterprise concepts as adopted by the major internet hedge funds and so forth. So it's a really exciting time for the social enterprise movement, and I hope you'll consider joining in one way or another, either informally or through the Public Benefit Corporation and related routes. So that's a quick overview of social enterprise in the state, and I see some questions are popping up here too. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate that. I put the Venn Foundation in the chat to for everybody to look that up if they want to. I didn't see, unless I missed it, I didn't see any direct questions, but if someone has a question for Tom, please throw it in there. I think we're about at the end of our time, if that's, if I'm correct, Neela. And just last thing I'd like to say on Legal Corps' behalf is thank everybody for attending and listening. And as Donna mentioned earlier, we do have probably 15 to 18 brief advice clinics per month, staffed by business law, nonprofit law, and intellectual property law attorneys. 30 minutes of guidance as you make progress on your venture. And so feel free to contact us at the emails that Donna included. Thanks to Tom and Shane and Nick for being here today, and to Launch Minnesota for having us. We do appreciate it.